This is Neil Baldwin.
Hello.
Neil is one of the most precocious professors I've ever met.
Oh,
in my
precocious.
life.
Thank you so much.
But
That makes
he's
me-
also an innovator, and he's the director of the Creative Research Center, which he started. So he is a maker, he's a tiller of soil and ideas. And this is, oh my God, I don't have enough time to tell you about this extraordinary lady.
He just forgot my name, that's what he's doing.
No, I didn't. I was just thinking about where do you start with somebody who's so magical. This is Janet Eilber, and she's the artistic director of the Martha Graham Dance Company. And I don't, there are a few people, and she's heard me say this before, but I'll tell you, there are very few people who are as devoted to dance as this lady. But not only is she devoted to it, but she is the keeper of one of the great flames, one of the great ideas in American dance, Martha Graham. And without Janet Eilber, the Martha Graham Dance Company would not be the force that it is today. And I'm very grateful.
Thank you, Jed.
So now, here's the sidebar story. I'm not going to take up too much more time. I know they're here to see you.
I'm worried.
But the big news is, and people need to know this, is that the whole reason, the entire reason we're doing the Martha Graham Dance Company here at Appalachian Spring is because of this guy. Totally his responsibility.
Gee.
You know, and this is the part that you're going to have to adjust to, is that he's writing a book about culture of Martha Graham. And he told me about it about 2 or 3 years ago. And because I like sort of the synergy of things and things coming together, you know, I thought, okay, so if I plan out 2, maybe 3 years in advance, and bring the Martha Graham Company here, you know what we can do? We can launch Neil Baldwin's book.
Yeah.
It's going to be worth the wait, Jed. It's going to be worth the wait.
Not quite finished yet.
No, the wheels of publishing grind very slowly. And it's being published by Knopf, which is part of Random House, and it's a very lengthy process. The writing is done, and the editing is almost done. So it's definitely going to happen.
I mean, we're not going to be a chapter in the book?
You're all in there, believe me. Everybody's in there.
Thank you for coming. You got a fantastic performance. This is the lead up. They know what they're talking about. I'm going this way.
Thanks, Jed.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I don't think you're supposed to move your chair because you're going to get out of the frame of the
Am I
camera.
okay?
I'm always choreographing.
It's
so.
great to interview someone who's so
Bossy.
non-directive. So we're going to talk about Appalachian Spring and the auditions. Yes, we are, and the show is coming up this evening, as you know. But then, as Janet and I discussed this over the phone a few days ago, we want to talk about the larger sort of spectrum of her responsibility and her not just responsibility, but mission as the artistic director of this great company, and what kinds of decisions she has to make, and how she curates the entire corpus of Martha Graham. And you know, we don't have enough time to cover everything, but we're going to try. So why don't we start? I would like Janet to start by telling us let's call it the origin story of Appalachian Spring, so we all have a common perspective on this great work.
The origin story of Appalachian Spring, in the late 1930s, early 40s, modern dance was a young art form, and Martha Graham had all through the 1930s a great new approach to modernism on stage with her company of all women. And she was using the geometric design of her dancers to send an emotional message. We think about Heretic, a work from 1929, where there's a single woman in white, Martha Graham, with 12 women in black who keep shifting and making walls that block the individual, the heretic. This was, in the 30s, her approach to modernism. When we get to 38, 39, and she accepts the first men into the company, Eric Hawkins and Merce Cunningham, suddenly narrative is open to her, and she begins to choreograph the mind of her lead women characters, as she does the bride in Appalachian Spring. But this is also attached to the development of modern dance itself as a young art form. And Eric Hawkins, who was become her husband, began writing to the Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge Foundation at the Library of Congress and talking with them about compositions, commissions for musical compositions for Martha Graham to choreograph. And this was a huge validation for this young art form to get this kind of governmental and foundation support for the art. The first composer hired was Aaron Copland. And Martha had known him over the years. In 31, she had choreographed his piano variations. She had sent him a script and asked him to write her another score, and it was a very dark script about Medea. And he declined and said, maybe something a little bit more like Our Town, something that he had been working on. But finally, he accepted the commission from the Library of Congress in 42, and Martha began to send him scenarios. The final one was titled House of Victory. They were very much focused on creating something that would be their contribution to the war effort, something about American, well, it was about America. And throughout these letters, they considered everything. They considered American primitive painting, Hart Crane, William Carlos Williams, Harper's Ferry. At one point, there was a small stage on the stage, and they were going to enact scenes from Uncle Tom's Cabin. They really considered the Shakers and the Quakers and the Puritans. They were swimming around in the great American conversations. The original cast of Appalachian Spring had townspeople and children and an Indian girl. Martha felt she represented our Genesis. Copland took these scripts. We have one of them with his notations in the margin, noting what sort of music he's going to put with Martha's descriptions. Martha's descriptions are wonderful, and if you have time, down in the lobby, the light boxes down there have quotes of what Martha wrote to Aaron Copland in order to inspire Appalachian Spring. So this took about 2 years, and on October 30th, 1944, actually on the 29th, Copland arrived in Washington, D.C., came to the dress rehearsal, said, Martha, what are you going to call the ballet? His scores had all said Ballet for Martha at the top. And she said, Appalachian Spring. And he said, well, that's a wonderful title. Where'd you get it? She said, it's from a poem by Hart Crane. He said, does it have anything to do with the dance? She said, no, I just liked it. I think she was being a little coy.
Yes, coy would be the right word.
But he tells the story of how people come up to him after hearing Appalachian Spring and said, oh, Mr. Copland, I could just see the Appalachians and smell spring in the air. And he said, I had no idea that's what she was going to call it. Mm-hmm. That's a kind of a long wind-up, but that's...
It's deserving of such a long wind-up. So this is just one of how many dances by Martha Graham are you currently... Do you have how big is the total repertoire of Martha Graham?
She created 181, and we feel that we could authentically recreate between 50 and 60.
Okay, so that's what I really would like to just spend a little time talking about, Janet, which you and I have talked over the years. But I'm fascinated by how you begin to, let's just take the word recreate, and you've used other words that we've talked about, restage, reimagine, reconstruct, but not to meld all of those together, but how do you, when you decide upon, curatorially decide you want to, I notice you mentioned Every Soul is a Circus. I hope that's okay to say that you mentioned that for next season. So when you decide on this, then how do you go about bringing this dance into now? What are the decisions that you have to make, and what are the choices you have to make?
Well,
Seems huge.
it's different with almost every dance.
So the whole routine is different, you mean?
Yes, because something like Appalachian Spring has almost never left our repertoire.
Uh-huh.
So as new dancers come into the company, they're woven into the cast, and it's just always alive. For something like Chronicle, our all-woman piece from 1937, 36, it was lost. When I was in the company in the 70s and 80s, that dance didn't exist. But an old film was found in the late 80s of one section of Chronicle, Steps in the Street. The company called in Sophie Maslow and Gertrude Schurer and some of Martha's original dancers from the 1930s and asked them to use this film to bring it back to life. I think Yuriko was really the principal reconstructor in that piece. So that was the luck of, you know, film being uncovered in somebody's basement. We have reimagined a few things. Most recently, the solo Ecstasis, which there are some beautiful Barbara Morgan photos of just Martha's torso in a tube-like dress. Virginie Massen, who's a former Graham dancer and now head of our second company, Graham 2, took all of those photos, found writings from Martha talking about how she found a meaningful relationship between the hip and the shoulder, and it changed the entire way she worked. This was a 1933 solo. There was no film of it. And being that there was no film of it, we don't really know how she went from this photo to this photo to, you know, Virginie had maybe 15 photos, and we could not find the original music. So she created a new solo, found new music, and we say it's Ecstasis, but that it's reimagined by Virginie Massen.
So it's really a case by case.
Yeah.
Depending there, and I mean, those of you, I see some scholars in the audience. Those of you who have spent any time in any of the dance archives at the Library of Congress or New York Public Library or the Martha Graham Resources Collection. So there are various iterations of dances that vary from very fuzzy, grainy, 30 seconds or 10 seconds, and then there's still photography, there's anecdotal, there's remembrances by people who were with her at the time. But in the end, we've also discussed this over the years. When you come in, you personally come in, how do you coordinate these strains and these tributaries, if you will?
Right.
Do you think that as an artistic director, that's kind of on you, or do you not think?
It's totally on me.
Oh, okay.
And you know, and I have a brilliant rehearsal director who also works. And another example is like CRC or Every Soul is a Circus. These are works that we do have films of, but they fall out of our rep. We do them every 10 years or so that when we come back to them, for example, Denise is really doing the nuts and bolts of getting Circe back together, and she says, I'm really liking the 1988 video. We also have a 1963 film. We also have a 2005 video. So she begins to make, and there are little differences. Martha would make changes. One of the great things about Martha's very long life is that she had to grapple with this idea. You know, she knew dancers' bodies were changing, audiences' expectations were changing, fabric for costumes were changing, lighting design, this sort of thing, and she loved all of that. She loved change, and she would incorporate it into her works, maintaining their emotional message. That was always the, you know, North Star.
Maintaining their emotional message.
Emotional message. So now as we put things together, we have this selection of things. When I come in, I'm really doing a number of things that I kind of have to just feel my way through. For example, we now find that Martha made changes in the late 70s, 80s to kind of refresh her dances. That now that we're in far enough away from the 20th century to understand the 20th century better, I look back at some of the first costumes, the original costumes, some of the original archival photos, and those things look fresher than the upgrades that she did in the 70s and 80s.
When you were dancing?
When I
with
was
the company.
dancing, yeah.
So just as a sort of a footnote to that part. So, and correct me if I get the chronology wrong, but I think you said you were 18 when you met her for the first time? You were at Juilliard, or?
I was in high school. I was 17 when
Okay,
I met her
17.
for the first time, yeah.
So, and then you danced with the company for all those years, and you were the principal dancer, and then you became the artistic director about, what, 15 years ago?
14.
Okay, so what, does this phrase ever enter your mind? Do you ever think of what Martha would have wanted? And I know it's a very loaded phrase, but
Yeah.
but what does that mean? What does that mean to you? And do you think that it's, because you broached the opening by saying you were getting further and further away, do you think that that's still somewhere in your mind at all, or no?
You know, I've hit on what may be, an excellent excuse, but it's the way I think about it.
That's
And
what we're wanting. That's what we're interested in.
And I mentioned it earlier. Martha loved change. She was avid about the new and about incorporating the new. She wanted to keep astonishing her audiences, so she was always looking for change and what was next. She called it doom eager. It's an Icelandic phrase that she loved. And she was in a constant state of free fall, just trying new things that nobody had tried before. So that's what the direction I take from what would Martha have wanted. She would have wanted experimentation and trying the unknown.
Okay, so you see, it's not a question of trying to put yourself into a mimetic, like an imitating form of like,
Right.
well, she would have wanted the movement to be like such and such. You're saying that it's the sensibility of change and the commitment to change is what you feel is the most.
I mean, if you're really talking about directing the ballets, I was just sort of talking about the Uber, how does the Graham world move forward. When she directed me in any of her roles, it didn't cross her mind that I would want to dance it the way she danced it. She understood that I was 7 or 8 inches taller than she was. My arms and legs were longer. I had a different personal aura. I had different strengths, and she wanted me to play to my own strengths. So it was really all about her drawing my own power and helping me understand my own power and how to use it powerfully on stage. So again, that's a directive that applies to anything.
Yes, that's true. And as I've sat in on many classes and rehearsals and over the years, and I've noticed that inspiration is very much present in the way that your dancers acculturate themselves to the dance that they're in, that they are being, their inner selves are being looked for. And this, I mean, last night, and you'll see, I mean, for instance, let's just to go back to the Appalachian Spring as an example, the 4
Followers.
The followers, the intensity of their personalities of each woman is just.
This is the 4 followers in
Yeah,
Appalachian
she
Spring
can
are
tell you
like
about.
a little drill team.
Yeah.
They are the cult that follows the itinerant preacher
Yeah.
that is part of the story. He's come to this place to marry this couple. And these 4 little followers follow him along with a fervor. Martha was, I think, winking at the fervor of American religion with the preacher and these 4 followers. whereas the pioneering woman is really a much more spiritual center of the dance. But the four followers are, they're unison, their jumps, they're so crisp and wonderful. This particular group of followers.
They are, but they're, each one is an individual.
Yeah.
They have the same, if I may speak very loosely, the same choreography, but each one of them has their own integral self that is very, it looks like it's very important to them and everything.
Yeah, I encourage everybody to watch them tonight.
Yeah.
And watch how each one individually looks at the preacher.
Oh yeah.
They all have little moments of,
like they have a girl
he's
crush.
looking at her and not the other ones, So there's a lot going on.
Okay, so to go back to travel a little bit further down this road of, so when you like have a sort of pull way back from the whole repertory that you were talking about, and I know you think years in advance about, like a museum curator actually, like years in advance about what your theme. I remember we talked about the Eve project like a few years ago. So how does what you think about for the future play play off of what you're doing now? Or do you just try to, how do you come up with a vision for like the next iterations of what you want to do?
Part of this through line for how we curate things is there are so many different points of access to Martha Graham's legacy. So I try to choose one that we haven't focused on. Like in years past, we have these overarching season themes. And in years past, we've chosen things like myth and transformation, where we focus on how Martha took the Greek stories or stories from the Bible or other legends and sort of transformed them to make modern statements. We had another theme, shape and design, where we focused on her modernism, like the dance Heretic and the other dances from the 30. We did sacred and profane, so we could talk about her more spiritual and religious. And we came up to the...
What was the one with the weapon?
Dance is a Weapon.
Dance is a Weapon.
We did the political, that was our political project. So we've been doing the Eve project for the last couple of years, leading up to the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote, but also being able to focus on the way Martha revolutionized the way women were presented on stage, making these characters who were complex and flawed and ambitious and powerful and remarkable. So it's sort of I think about, well, which aspect of Martha do we want to focus on in the next few years, and that's how those themes kind of move forward.
When you say which aspect of Martha, this is the Martha that you, and tell me if I'm misrepresenting this, but this is the Martha that you knew, or is it the institutionalized? What is the Martha?
Martha's artistry, as I understand it. Because I didn't know her in the 30s.
That's true.
But I recognize, again, gaining perspective, when I was dancing with her and she was alive, you have no perspective. This person you're just going to work with every day and, wondering if she'll let you go early so you can, live, things like that. But gaining some perspective on the works, now that I'm outside the works and being able to study them over and over again as today's company rehearses them, or as we look for different points of access, or as we develop the exhibit that's downstairs, or we work with museums, or we work with universities to do special panels, kind of gathering all of that information has really made me appreciate all of these different points of access. And
it seems almost inexhaustible.
I think so.
I mean, we also talked about this before, but when you're in the presence, and I'm being perfectly, when you're in the presence of true greatness, which I think is what you are about to be, you realize how inexhaustible it is. For me, coming into this, it's only been like 10 years, which has been to Martha Graham. To Martha Graham, she says it takes 10 years to make a dancer. I would say it's taken me 10 years to even have to feel like I do have some understanding, which is why this book is taking so long, and that's not an excuse. It's just, it's real, it's real. So let's talk about the other thing that Janet wanted to be sure, and I'm going to make sure I use the right words that she said to me on the phone, which is, okay, so why is the auditions in this program, which is the other piece, and that is the whole other realm of what Janet is doing, which you may know if you've been following the company, is to bring in other contemporary dancers and commission works that are derived from or in some way predicated upon works of Martha Graham or in response to Martha Graham. So talk about that whole other domain, because that's
Well, it relates to these themes we've been talking about, because the themes allow me to hire some of today's top choreographers who will create a work for us that relate to the theme. So we don't want them to create another a Graham-esque work at all. We want to hire people that have very different, diverse voices, but they fit well under the programming we're doing, the way we're curating the program, because they're all relating to this overarching theme. Just to back up a little, you're talking about the greatness of Martha Graham that they're about to witness. I think Appalachian Spring, the reason it has constantly been in our repertoire, and the reason that it still speaks at 75 years old, is because of the way Graham and Copeland and Isamu Noguchi were getting down to essentials. They were really, all of those townspeople and the Indian girl and the kids in the scripts and the various things that they discussed didn't really get thrown out. They got distilled into being the essences of America in this piece. And the essences of America are, have some big questions and some big arguments, and this dance, I think, still allows us to access today's American conversation, because it's not all that different from the conversation that was going on 75 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's elemental to the country. Mm-hmm. So I had to say that, and now I've forgotten what the rest of your question was.
We're talking about like Pam Tanowitz and
oh, yes.
and Larry Kegwin and all the people who have come in there and done things with you and all that kind of
stuff. So it's been wonderful to be able to hire people with very diverse voices that have created works for the company, and you'll see that the company tonight, I'm so lucky with the dancers I have right now.
You can't believe they're the same people.
They can do anything. They can really do anything.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. So we've worked with Sidi Larbi Sherkawi and Nacho Duato and Mats Ek and Pam Tanowitz and Maxine Doyle and Bobby Jean Smith, and a real just a array of diverse contemporary choreographers. But the program that came together for Montclair came through Jed Wheeler. We began talking about the 75th anniversary of Appalachian Spring and Neil's book, and a commission that would be a companion piece to Appalachian Spring. So it's kind of beyond our thematic umbrella, but an actual companion piece to Appalachian Spring. What does that mean? That was the challenge presented to Troy Schumacher, the choreographer, and Augusta Reed Thomas, the composer. And they had a very intricate and simpatico collaboration. Gusty basically used the same orchestration as Copeland's 13 Instruments for Appalachian Spring. His original score for Appalachian Spring and for Martha was 13 instruments. She switched out a couple, she added some percussion, and yet the score sounds quite different. You know, you won't feel like you're hearing Appalachian Spring twice, that's for sure. They went round and round about the thematic material and what they would choose, and decided that there were pioneers. What would a pioneer of today look like? That was one of the questions they asked, because Appalachian Spring is about the frontier and facing the future. And I think you'll see that they have taken on this same idea about optimism and determination about moving into the future and put it in a dance, a theater work that is witty and yet has serious undertones.
It's ebullient, and it also has conflict.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say too much.
Okay.
Really, the surprise factor. No, the surprise factor
I
is
agree.
huge.
I agree.
There are some big surprises, so
Right.
and I don't want to give them away.
But I think that it's vastly different from Appalachian Spring, and yet the combination is exciting, has a resonance. It's a 1 + 1 makes 3, I think.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. So let's talk a little bit more, and then we want to have time for questions. We didn't forget about you. Don't think that we're just... We could talk for, till tomorrow. We didn't forget about you. Right, Janet?
Right.
Well, we almost forgot about them, but we didn't totally forget. Okay, so let's talk about the ways in which I remember when Bill T. Jones was here, to go back to, and I was reminded of that. Bill T. Jones. Sorry. Is it okay to mention something else?
It's okay. It's okay.
No, but when Bill T. Jones was here working with our students, he also emphasized, but in a different way, the importance of the ensemble and the importance of each individual that is within. And I wonder if, Janet, if you could talk about that with respect to Martha Graham's aesthetic as you see it, in terms of the mentality toward each individual person that she, because when you talk to people who have danced with her and when you listen to tapes of the people who are no longer with us who danced with her, there's this sense in which everybody talks about the way she drew out, she wanted who they were, but then you come up against the totality of the whole ensemble, and how do you see those two things in relation to each other?
Neil, I think we've touched on it with the followers, but one of the prevalent, I think the most prevalent theme in Martha's work is self-empowerment and the power of the individual. Even during her group dances, the modernist group dancers of the 30s, the heretic is an example because, of course, it was Martha's role to be the heretic in the middle of that thing. But when you get into the 40s and she takes on the Greeks and she's talking about Medea or Phaedra or Jocasta, any of these women, Judith later on, and St. Joan, and Mary, and Emily Dickinson, and Emily Bronte, and all the group of women that she brought to life. She was using them to talk about finding your path in life, and the thing that she taught me in rehearsal, which is figure out what your individual power is and use it powerfully. That's what she was all about. So yes, we have group dances, we have people dancing in a chorus, but she always instructed them as individuals. The dancers in the chorus of Night Journey, which is a violent, fabulous movement for this group of women. Montclair danced that a few years ago.
Yes, we did.
Yeah. So the unison is essential. They're delivering the same message, and yet they're supposed to be coming together as individuals. So it's just built into who she was and what she believed.
So you would say that really is the fundamental drive in her way of approaching dance, is to go on the night journey within, as it were, and then and bring that out. That she tried to inculcate that in people.
She didn't try to inculcate it in people. She just believed that that's what everyone should believe. She didn't really sit down and say, "Now let me tell you what
Janet,
you
have to find your inner voice."
No,
and you have
no.
Okay, no. I just want people to understand this.
No, this was just her level of expectation that one would strive for one's own most powerful self.
That was a given.
It was a given. It was a given. And if you didn't kind of understand that and swim in that river, you really didn't want to be a gram dancer. You know, she could see it in a minute.
Really?
Oh, she could see it in a minute.
You mean she could see it from the beginning when someone came to her? She could see it, or she could?
No, if you couldn't drop the facade, you know, when I first started working with her, I had a nice tip to my head.
Yes.
That I thought was great.
You still do.
You know, and
the elegant neck.
Yeah, and it was actually because one of my first roles was the pioneering woman in Appalachian Spring, and I was like 22, and the only reason I was given that role is because I was tall. I got all the Earth Mother roles, but you'll see the pioneering woman never does this tonight. She is absolutely. I mean, finally, they said to me, you have to do this role. The whole role is if you have books balanced on your head. All those jumps, everything, you have to have a level head. And basically, Martha looked at me and said, you have to get your head on straight. I mean, literally. And that physicality gives you an intellectual and emotional instruction. Having your head on straight. Being in line with the earth for the pioneering woman, the horizon, you'll see all of her gestures. She fits into the shape of the Noguchi set, the angles, but it's also that she's got her head on straight. She's been here before, she's seen it before, and she tells these other characters that everything's going to be fine, just keep on moving forward.
Okay, well, that's very profound. How about
she was a profound woman.
No, I mean, this is an understatement.
Yeah.
And just to add one 30-second other thing, and then we'll open it up for everybody. But I think that since, yes, I have been working on this book for a very long time, more than any other. I've written many biographies in my life. The average is 5, 6, 7 years maybe. Okay, but I think I've talked with Janet about this. I think that Martha Graham, the depth and the profundity of Martha Graham as an artist needs to be articulated for a wider public. That was my original goal. But now that I've come to the end, I realize the book ends by saying that an ending is impossible. And that's kind of the way Appalachian Spring ends. That's what I thought last night, the final gestures, which I won't imitate, but there's a sense in which the end is the beginning, which is what's so wonderful about it. So let's I know we have to be mindful. So let's have I'm sure you all have some questions you'd like to have this opportunity to speak to Janet. And there's someone.
So, with Veterans Day and all the discussions of post-World War I impact, impeachment hearings, her having lived through totalitarianism, McCarthyism, World War II, did she have any other important works that might have had a political message?
She did. This one we've been speaking about, Chronicle, from 1936. She created this work. Her company was still all women at that point. And it was her reaction to the rise of fascism in Europe. She got an invitation from the Nazis to dance at the Olympic Games in Berlin. And we still have that letter, her turning it down in no uncertain terms, saying she refused to associate herself with that regime. And in addition, there were members of her dance company who would not be welcome because there were many young Jewish women in her company at the time. So she just had her genius thumb on the pulse of the international national conversation over the years. When you look at Clytemnestra, we're all the way up to 1958 at this point, and it's about Queen Clytemnestra and her ultimate power, and it's just ahead of the women's movement, the free love movement, you know, and the story and the way she takes these characters on with her typical eroticism, frankly, from her Contraction and Release, where it's all about the torso and the pelvis, and she was not afraid to take on those those subjects that the rest of us were on the cusp of beginning to talk about. So yeah, you can kind of follow her line of thinking and how connected she was to what we were all thinking or about to think.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did she have a dance school like the American Ballet School?
Mm-hmm.
Did she have a dance?
She did have a dance school. I think in her early days that was the only way she could make money because it took a while for her actual choreography and dance to begin to pay. I'm not sure it ever really did. But yes, she started her school back when she started her company in well, she probably was teaching before the company in 1926.
She was teaching in Denishon.
Yeah.
Before she started her company in New York,
Yeah.
she trained in California with
Ruth
Ted
St.
Shawn
Dennis and
Ruth
Ted Shawn.
And interestingly, Ted Shawn was sort of in charge of the school of Denishon, and he immediately put her in charge of teaching the younger kids, which I always thought was interesting.
Yeah.
He thought she had a way with the little ones.
Yeah.
And didn't she like people when they brought in their babies to work?
Oh yeah,
I'm
she
just
loved
saying,
children because they didn't have the facade.
Aha.
She loved them because they just would look straight at her.
Yeah.
You know, she just loved it.
They had their heads on straight.
Yeah, they had their anyway. Yes, and we continue to have a school. It's very active. We have a big international student program, and
Talk about the education side of Martha Graham now.
Well, we have partnerships right now. Montclair students are learning one of the Graham ballets. It'll be on their
Yes.
fall program, which we're all looking forward to. We often. We have something called the Panorama Project. When the company tours, sometimes our teaching artists go to that city before we get there and teach the local dancers one of Martha's dances, and they perform on a program with us. We have teaching artists in the New York public schools. We do master classes like we did this morning here. So we look for opportunities to connect on educational projects, even above what you would think of master classes and licenses. I mean, like our 19 poses that we had cutouts of Martha Graham on campus this week, and people were walking up next to Martha Graham. That was quite a
thing.
Doing the same pose, and one of the students here created a VR game of the 19 poses. With their 19 poses for the 19th Amendment. We put together these different Martha Graham poses that are power poses, and so we're always looking for ways, more points of audience access.
We'll talk about that collaboration. I'm sorry, I know I told you could ask questions. Just one more question. Talk about the Google relationship,
yes,
because that was just incredible.
We have a relationship with Google because 2011, I think, they came to us and said they wanted to decorate their homepage with a Google Doodle about Martha Graham. So we helped them. You can still find it on YouTube. We helped them do a little animation about Martha Graham's birthday. But that led to a relationship, and about a year and a half ago, we had a residency at Google where they allowed us to experiment with different new technology, from the tilt brush, which is a 3D paintbrush, to a new way to do motion sensors on a body, so we could have one of our dancers have an avatar dancing the way they were dancing, a camera that had a memory that we filled with all of our images of lamentation, and when the camera saw one of our dancers do lamentation, it would project generations of Graham dancers in the same pose or the same position. So this comes under the heading of Martha would have wanted us to do it.
Oh yes, I'm sure.
Because it was great fun, and we continue to look for ways to incorporate that into our artistry. The lamentation camera actually we've developed into an installation because it really it became a different work of art than lamentation itself. Whereas the tilt brush and the motion capture, it was fun stuff, and made us think, gosh, could we have a Martha Graham hologram? But it didn't quite reach the level of being ready for an audience.
Question, yes.
How has being the artistic
It's taught me a lot about dance audiences, and that becomes more and more my perspective. What will engage? I hate the word; we've used it too many times. But what will engage, intrigue, astonish, and bring new people to the Martha Graham legacy? And in that respect, it means I have to look not just at our audiences, but all of our possible audiences. You know, who's watching So You Think You Can Dance?
Yeah.
Who's going to rock concerts and football games? I mean, anybody who's buying a ticket is fair game as far as I'm concerned. We were talking with one university about having a conductor of their band do the 19 poses at a football game and see if we could get the whole stadium doing the 19 poses. It's really taught me to have an open mind about our possible audience, because I think it's kind of anybody if we hit them in the right way.
Well, see, this is the thing. We've been talking on such a very civilized and aesthetic level about all these wonderful, creative, artistic things that are being done by the Martha Graham Company, but the sort of corollary of that is how do you build? And I know this is a huge other area, but the whole challenge of building an audience that is more than just preaching to the choir. The choir is very large. It's not, but you know, beyond preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
Getting people who are, like, not to use myself as an example, but people who didn't know that much about dance once upon a time, and then can get drawn in by virtue of their affinity with other art forms.
Yeah.
And just writing, literature, art, visual art, etc.
Right. Well, that's what our themes do, but it's also, you know, we pay a lot of attention to social media.
Yes, you certainly do.
You know, there are many tools to attract new audiences these days, and we're trying to stay on top of it. It's not easy. Technology moves pretty fast, but.
Do you feel that's become more preponderant in your mind, that you, Janet, have had to really become really up on that?
Oh, absolutely. I think anybody in the
Alive.
nonprofit arts world has got to be
nonprofit
up.
arts world.
Yeah.
I'm giving you a time cue.
Oh, time, what does that mean?
It means we have a show tonight.
What is
and
the
you got to
time?
wrap it up.
Oh, see, what do I know? What do I know? You know, writers, we don't have any sense of time. Do we have time for one more question, Jed? Okay, one more, yeah, okay.
So would you say that an important part of keeping a choreographer's work alive is sharing it with dancers and groups other than the company? Because there are choreographers, of course, who restrict the teaching and the restaging of their works.
I think the first thing you said, I think we need to open the doors to let anybody, that's what the 19 poses is about. Anybody can try a Martha Graham move in those poses. You know, when someone learns to play the piano when they're 6, they're playing Haydn. You know, that nobody restricts them from studying the work of genius. The outcome may be different, but the journey is what's important. You know, our company can do a brilliant outcome. We can do the Graham works in authentic, moving ways. But the importance of what a student dancer might take away from swimming around in those ideas is incredibly important to us. Yeah, I'm astonished that there are organizations that restrict their materials, that don't allow their dancers to engage in social media, all that kind of stuff. It just seems to me, I don't know, just seems to me.
Well, it's a great honor to have the Martha Graham Company here, and I just want to say that for all of you, and thank you so much, Janet, for everything that you're doing. It's just wonderful. And
My
great.
pleasure. I hope you all enjoy the show.
Thank you, Janet.